if you think about a vote is kind of like a token. So how many votes you get is how many tokens you have, and where you send the token to is who you're voting for. And you can use the blockchain because it's immutable, it's time-stamped, and it's auditable to audit the system as a whole. It's immutable, meaning that once the vote is counted, it can't be changed. So everybody has a strong financial incentive to break your shit. So if you have that, that means that any voting system will be under extreme scrutiny by some of the world's greatest hackers.
When you're talking about voting and all these other things that we can use blockchain for, I don't understand how that works. And so how would we vote on the blockchain?
Okay, so if you think about a vote is kind of like a token. So how many votes you get is how many tokens you have, and where you send the token to is who you're voting for. And if you're allowed to vote for just one person, it's an atomic transaction. If you're allowed to vote for multiple people, you have a certain amount of power, so that's how much tokens you have, and then you split it amongst multiple addresses. So now that you have that set up, you're like, wait a minute, that's exactly the same as like how Bitcoin works or any of these cryptocurrencies work. You have tokens and addresses, and you can push them around. So when you do an election, there are a collection of things you have to concern yourself with. Like first off, who gets the tokens? So these are registered voters. So the most important part of any election is, what is your voter registration process and how secure is that? So we have numerous people, countries, other people come say, would you like to bid on an RFP for a blockchain-based voting system? And the very first thing I ask is, well, what does your identity system look like? How do you identify people in your nation state? And if that's not a secure system, I have no desire to build a voting system, because all you're doing is you're building a very secure way to count dead people. And a very secure way to count fake people that don't exist. Because I can always just register someone in the ballot. So the step one is, what is your digital identity component, and how do you get to know somebody is real and they're suitable for the election? Then the next stage, assuming that everybody is suitable, then you have to decide, well, what are the election mechanics that go on? So is everybody equal? So everybody gets one vote? Or do certain people have stronger votes than others? So like weighted votes. And so like shareholder votes are like this. And so if you own stock in Microsoft or Google or something, well, if you have a lot of shares, you have more voting power than other people. Okay, so you can have many different configurations. And again, it's just like tokens. How many vote tokens do you have for that particular thing? Then you ask, okay, is it an anonymous or is it a public and transparent vote? So in a lot of elections for shareholder votes, you can see who voted where. This person voted against Elon Musk's pay package for Tesla. This person voted yes. Okay. Others are anonymous ballots, meaning that when you vote, the outside world can't see it. But then you ask another question of auditability. So just because the outside world can't see how you voted, can you see how your vote was recorded? And some systems, they say no. And the reason being is they don't want you to sell your vote, because if you can prove how you voted, then Bob over there can give you a $100 bill if you vote this way. And other systems, they say, yes, you can do that because you want to be able to check that. Then there is the mechanism. Is it atomic, meaning you can only vote for one thing? Or does it allow you to split? You can vote for many things. And so that's ranked choice or linear preference. And then also you can have mechanics where if you have a lot of voting power, the more you vote for any one thing, there's a dampening effect as you start voting more. So if you try to put all your voting power in, it actually ends up being less. It's called quadratic voting. So you have all kinds of mechanism for that. So those can be grafted on and built into a cryptocurrency as an application. And you can use the blockchain because it's immutable, it's time-stamped, and it's auditable to audit the system as a whole. It's immutable, meaning that once the vote is counted, it can't be changed. It's time-stamped, meaning that the vote only occurred in a legitimate time period when the election was occurring. It wasn't in and out of the election period, right? And then it's auditable, meaning that everybody can see those records. They can actually verify that that is what it is. So you actually get two properties that are really cool. Not only can you can verify your own vote was counted correctly, you can verify the integrity of the system as a whole. This is a property called inclusive accountability. So, and we lack this in most infrastructure. Everything is trust me, bro. So why is the money in your bank the way it is? Well, that's JP Morgan Chase's ledger or Bank of America's ledger or something like that. And there's a loose consensus amongst all the different banks that the ledgers are accurate. But at the end of the day, there's no like mutable law of physics that says the number you see on the screen is actually an accurate number, right? So with a system that's conclusively accountable, any user of the system has enough information to reconstruct the entire history of the system and verify that that state is correct that they're looking at. Bitcoin, every transaction that's happened since January 3rd, 2009, same for Cardano when it launched, is verifiable, meaning you could start at the very beginning and go through the entire history of the system. And at the tip of the system, what's going on today here in June of 2025, you'll be able to see that that transaction is connected to a chain of events all the way back to the beginning. So inclusive accountability is super powerful, but super expensive to maintain. It's very hard, and there's a lot of work you have to do to have it. But if you have it, it means you can have self-integrity. You personally can verify with your computer that the system that you're looking at, the history that you're looking at, is correct by its construction. This is why it's so seductive to try to build a voting system on a blockchain system. Then there's the question you ask of the on and off ramp. So what does the user experience look like? How do I personally do that? Okay, well, you'd have your phone or your computer, and the same way you would send a cryptocurrency is the same way you would vote. So you'd vote with your phone or an app. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't know, my phone can get hacked, or there can be a problem with it. So a lot of people, what they want to do are what are called hybrid systems, where they have a paper component and they have a digital component. So you vote with the blockchain on your phone, and then it generates a paper vote at the same time. Or you vote with paper, and then it generates a blockchain record at the same time. Then you have a dual audit. The votes have to match. So you count all the paper, you count all the digital votes. There should be a one-to-one correspondence between those two sides. And they're different modalities. One is a digital modality, and the other one's a paper modality. So to hack them, you have to use fundamentally different social engineering for both of these types of things. Now, every election has other properties too, like how frequently do you do an election? What's the cost of running the election? The ballot access is also very important. In fact, Stalin used to say it doesn't matter, who gets the vote. It matters who counts the votes and what do you vote on. So if there's only one candidate on the ballot, you're always going to end up with Kim Jong-un. You always end up with the guy. So who gets to be on that ballot? And what are the inclusion-exclusion principles of this? And this is how third parties are excluded in the United States, amongst other places. And then when and how is that counting and tallying done? The blockchain system will take care of the tallying, and also you can program any ballot architecture that you want inside that type of system, because there's no cost on a digital side to have 1 million candidates in the system. The paper side, there is. So that's one of the excuses they use to exclude people unless they sign hundreds of thousands of signatures and things like that, is that they'll say, well, we can't print, 5,000 people on the ballot. It'd be prohibitively expensive to print like 40 pages times 5 million, something like that. It doesn't make sense. So in your trade-off profile...
Could you just write in a name?
You could, and that's
not have anybody on it.
But that's always available in all ballots, right? There's the write-in spot that they have. But that's disenfranchising because, to vote for Bob, you just fill in a circle. To vote for Bill, you have to remember his last name. And what if he has like Schwarzenegger as his last name, or it's like, who's going to spell that right? And all these things. So it's the more a person has to do.
That would be your job as the candidate to make sure that is addressed.
Yeah, you give him a stamp, right? here's the Schwarzenegger stamp. In fact, they used to do that. It's called a down ticket. In the 19th century, when voter laws were a little looser, people would print out ballots with the entire stuff already pre-filled out, and they would hand it to people as they were walking to the polling thing. So they say a down ticket candidate meant that the whole party was on one ballot. And so all the Republicans would be on it, or all the Democrats were on it. Here's your pre-filled ballot. Just go and drop it in the box. And they would stand outside the polling places and hand people that. And they'd also bribe people, too. They'd be like, hey, you want a drink? You have to take this, put it in the box. If I give you a beer, okay. It's like all kinds of dirty stuff happens in elections. So, at the very least, having the digital side to replace mail-in ballots makes a lot of sense to me, because I hate mail-in ballots. It's one of the worst ways of voting. You don't have a chain of custody of the ballot. You send it out over the open mail, you have no idea who's actually filling in the bubbles. And also, you can sell your vote very easily, because you just hand the ballot to the person who's buying the vote. They can fill in all the bubbles and you sign it. They're like, oh, that's fraud. It's like, who's going to know? And the other thing is, compromised people, you can do bundling. You can just go to an old folks home and register hundreds or thousands of people in an area, and they're all mentally compromised. And then the ballots show up because they have a legal right to vote. You can't exclude them. And then you can just fill the ballots all in and then do a drop in the middle of the night for people. So it's a horrifically insecure system when you really start thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And they say, oh, they're going to do signature verification. It's like that never really works. It's not a digital signature. And you just sign it. Like, how many are actually rejected inside these types of things? So building voting systems, I like the idea of preserving inclusive accountability, allowing you to check your own vote. And also, you have to have a strong digital ID system for it. Then 95% of the integrity issues are probably gone. And if it's on blockchain infrastructure, you have that inclusive accountability. You know the system as a whole is properly constructed. And again, that smart cow effect that we were talking about earlier, once somebody has designed a secure voting system, it's free. Everybody has access to that design of that secure voting system. So what's nice about the cryptocurrency space is the vote on changes to cryptocurrencies, like new monetary policy or upgrading the code or something like that. You're testing a voting system. And the hacker has an incentive to try to break that, to steal the money or damage the cryptocurrency. Because if you can damage a cryptocurrency, you can short sell it, right? You can go and say, oh, I'm going to take all these short positions here and then I'll create grievous harm, and then the value goes down and I make tons of money because I'm leveraged short selling for it. So everybody has a strong financial incentive to break your shit. So if you have that, that means that any voting system will be under extreme scrutiny by some of the world's greatest hackers. And if it stands the test of time, it has reliability. And just like RSA does or elliptic curve crypto does, it's like the multi-decade reliability that you have. And then you can say, okay, that's a good voting system, and we can plop it down. Voting systems are also connected to demographics. You know, the older people may want to use paper. Younger people, because they're natives on phones, would want to use phones. By having a hybrid system, you accommodate basically both sides of the system. And then they're also connected to frequency, like how often are you having an election. What's nice is by having a digital system, you can do digital only for preference polling. So you can say things like, hey, the Broncos just won the Super Bowl, and citizens of Denver, we want to know when to do the parade. Do we do it on Tuesday or Thursday? So you can send to verified Denver residents a poll and actually get a vote that's statistically significant and actually almost like you ran an election, and it costs you almost nothing to do because you have direct democracy. You can just push these things out. And then you can start talking about more exotic forms like approval polls or things like that. And you say, if the politician falls below a certain approval rating for a protracted period of time, there's automatically a recall election, or they get suspended until they can get above that approval rating or something like that. So you can start thinking about much more granular representative democracy than just term-based representative democracy.
This sounds amazing. I mean, is anybody close to implementing something like this? Any countries, any governments?
Well, like liquid feedback was used by the Pirate Party over in Sweden, and a lot of countries do ranked choice voting and other things like that. And organizational design, people have come up with all kinds of cool, interesting voting systems. But it's a field, when you look at the nation state level, that evolves very slowly, years, decades, centuries. And typically it evolves as a consequence of an invasion, a collapse, a calamity, or a major scandal. You tend not to change social infrastructure until social infrastructure becomes inconvenient for some reason. And in many cases, social infrastructure is unchanged even when it's inconvenient because it benefits an oligarchy inside the country. Like back to India and cryptocurrencies, like why did they have the 1% tax and why did they not open up for remittances even though it would be wonderful for them? Because of these large companies that make all this money by being middlemen to prevent those remittances from coming in. So we have a unique opportunity in the United States because Trump really does want to change the voting system and make it more secure. And the U.S. government is embracing blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. But again, you can't just talk about voting. You have to talk about the digital infrastructure. And there's a whole different house of concepts there.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.